Do we have a witness for the state?
Yes, Your Honor. We would call Kurt Rosenthal.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead and have a seat there. State your name and spell it for the record, please.
Kurt, K-U-R-T, Rosenthal, R-O-S-E-N-T-H-A-L.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Your Honor. What is your current employment?
The City of Dubuque Police Department.
How long have you been so employed?
I will have 22 years on this September.
What are your present duties?
I am an investigator with the Criminal Investigation Division.
How long have you been there?
I'll be back there for 5 years come this September.
Do you have any special training and qualifications required to do your job?
I've been through multiple trainings over my career specific to CID. I've been to crime scene schools, interview and interrogation, homicide school, and countless others.
Do you have certain trainings and certifications that are required as part of your employment?
Yes, sir.
Are you up to date on all of that?
I am.
On January 18th of this year, were you called to 1605 Abacus Street?
Yes, sir.
What was the nature of that call?
Shortly after 8:50 in the morning, we were alerted of a suspicious death call at 1605 Avoca. We gathered up in the office. At that point in time, we were advised that the decedent was Jennifer Dazey, and it appeared that it was a homicide.
Did you respond to that alone, or did you go with somebody?
No, at 9:03 that morning, Corporal Hoff and I got in a car together and traveled up to Avoca, arrived on scene about 9:10.
When you arrived at the scene, what did you do?
As soon as we got on scene, we were advised that the initial person who found Miss Dazey had encountered her son, Tyler Dazey, inside the residence, and we believed that he was still inside. So at that time, I went to the south side of the residence as part of the perimeter.
Were there other officers also securing the perimeter?
Yes, sir, there was multiple officers on scene.
What do you do when you take the perimeter?
We're just covering points of exit, make sure somebody doesn't run out the back door or jump out a window.
You also looking so nobody goes in while officers are clearing?
Absolutely.
Do you also check for signs of forced entry?
Yes, but based on where I was located, that really wasn't a duty of mine.
At some point, did you learn that the house was cleared and someone was in custody?
Yes, I heard radio traffic from one of the patrol officers inside that they had one in custody.
What did you do at that point?
At that point in time, I circled around to the front of the residence, and at the front door, I came in contact with my captain, Captain Style. He had already been inside, kind of briefed me on the injuries that he observed, and noted that Tyler Dazey was in fact the person they had in custody. At that point in time, we kind of decided who was going to do what moving forward, and I was tasked with trying to interview Mr. Dazey at the law enforcement center. And then Corporal Stater was going outside to get a Tyvek suit so that we could dress Mr. Dazey, and that's when I entered the residence.
What did you observe when you entered the residence?
I walked through the living room and to the north portion of the house where the two bedrooms were. As I got in that area to my left in the west bedroom, I saw Officer Slight down on a knee, and he had secured Mr. Dazey, who was face down on the ground and was naked. Corporal Leck was also in that room. At that time, another officer on scene directed me back to the living room to point out Echo, the dog, dead on the couch. I then returned back to the area of the bedrooms. I peered into the east bedroom, and I could see that Miss Dazey was clearly deceased in her bed. I took a few steps into that room. I was only in the room for maybe 15 seconds, but I was able to note the severe lacerations to her head and face. There was pooling of blood near her right side of her neck, and I could also see that she had a couple fingers severed on her left hand. I backed out, and then I went back into the west bedroom where Mr. Dazey was being secured.
Did you observe a toolbox in that bedroom?
I did. Inside of that bedroom, there was a large black and blue toolbox on wheels like a mechanic would have in their shop.
At some point along the way, this is much later than being at the house, we'll come back here, but did you have any involvement in tracking Kylie Frey's movements around on January 17th and January 18th?
I did later in the investigation.
How did you go about doing that, and what was the purpose?
I don't know if anybody spoke of this yet, but I think we have over 1,000 traffic cameras within the city of Dubuque. Pretty much every main intersection in town is covered. The downtown area, there's pretty much every single corner is covered. So I utilized traffic camera footage to track her movements throughout the 17th and the early hours of the 18th. At the time, Kylie was residing in the 2400 block of Jackson. There's a bank of cameras right at 24th and Jackson. So I started reviewing those from the morning of the 17th, and I was able to track her movements all the way until she comes to the scene on Avoca after police were already on scene.
Why were you tracking her movements via those cameras?
As part of any investigation, especially in a homicide, not only are we looking for evidence to identify possible suspects, we're also trying to exclude potential suspects. So in this case, we're just following up on her statement she gave to other officers about her whereabouts.
So when you start an investigation, it's kind of a broad net you throw out. You don't get a narrow focus and pick a couple people and only investigate them?
No, even in this case, day one, we arrest our suspect, but that doesn't end the work. There could be other people that were potentially involved. New information could come in, so we want to get on that early, try to figure out who is all involved in this family, friends of Jennifer, see what they had going on in the days leading up.
Do you know if Nick Frey was also tracked on cameras?
Yes, I believe that was tasked with Investigator Hoff.
And that's a common thing to do on any investigation, is that right?
It is.
After doing all of that, well, let me ask you this. Are you familiar with a Life 360 application for phones?
I have a general idea of what it is.
Were you provided with data on that from Kylie Frey?
Yes, Lieutenant Crable on January 19th had met with Kylie, and she provided her Life 360 data from her phone to Crable.
Did you end up with that data?
I did. After I had tracked Kylie over those 2 days on traffic cameras, then I reviewed the Life 360. I didn't look at that prior to. I wanted to have a clean slate, so I didn't miss anything when I was reviewing it. And those two, when I looked at them side by side, mirrored one another.
By the way, how long did it take you to review all those traffic cameras and track her on those days?
Well, I first pick her up on the morning of the 17th, leaving her residence about 9:25, and then I watch her until just short of 11 a.m. the next day. I have her at home throughout the night, Wednesday night into Thursday. I watch that camera throughout the entire night. So it took me hours to watch that 26 hours of footage.
Did you at some point compare the data from that Life 360 to what you found in your review of traffic cameras?
Yes, I noted they mirrored one another.
In all respects?
Sorry?
That was in all respects?
Yes, the Life 360, the first data, the oldest data that was provided to Crable was Wednesday afternoon around the 3:30 hour. So obviously I had more details as far as the movements. I had her from early that morning.
So you didn't see anybody leave the residence all night, the night of the 17th into the 18th?
No, she gets dropped off. She works at the Village Inn on JFK. She gets dropped off by a coworker right about 10:30. They stop right in the middle of the street in a white Nissan SUV. I can see Kylie get out of the passenger seat and then walk to her residence. I watched the entirety of that night on Jackson Street, and the next time I see her is right before 8 o'clock. She steps outside of her residence, gets in a cab. That cab drives her directly to the Village Inn. She goes back to work. She's there at 8:05, and the next movements I see from her is when Jennifer's neighbor, Jill Risselman, she picks her up in a green Jeep about 10:52 in the morning, and she drives her direct to the neighborhood on Avoca, showing up there about 11 o'clock.
And did that 360 data match up with that?
Yes, it
It
did.
showed that she never left her residence the entire night?
Correct. It shows her arriving at home from work on Wednesday evening, being home until I see her get in that cab and leave the next morning.
Now, in terms of possibilities, would it be possible for her to have slipped out the back door and evaded the traffic cameras and left her phone at home?
There's possible, and there's probable. Is it possible? But we have absolutely zero evidence showing that she ever left the residence.
Okay, now at some point in your investigation, you had contact with Tyler Dazey, is that correct?
Correct. When I entered the bedroom, when I was first on scene while we were waiting, someone to bring in a Tyvek suit.
Did you have anything to do with putting on the Tyvek suit? Did you assist?
I did. I zipped it up.
What's the purpose of a Tyvek suit?
In this case, it was to preserve any possible evidence that was contained on Tyler or Mr. Dazey's body, specifically if there was any blood, hairs, or DNA from Jennifer.
And that has little boots that go with it as well?
Correct. It's all one piece.
Did you make any observations about Mr. Dazey at that time?
Your Honor, I'm going to object, knowing where this is going, pursuant to Iowa Rules of Evidence 5.401, 5.402, and 5.403.
Okay, the objection's overruled. Go ahead. Ask the question, Mr. Nelson.
Did you make any observations about Mr. Dazey at that time?
Well, the first thing I noted was his erection. But then once we got him onto his feet, he had a blank stare on his face. He was moving slowly, lethargically, but he was following our commands.
Did you have any conversations with Mr. Dazey at that time?
Not really a conversation. I introduced myself. I told him that he wasn't being placed under arrest, but he was being detained, and that we were going to be transporting him to the law enforcement center where we would talk to him down there. I asked him if he understood. He didn't respond audibly, but he did nod to me.
Did you end up taking him to the hospital first?
We ended up shifting gears, and eventually Officer Hesselbacher and I would transport him to Mercy.
Why did you decide to take him to the hospital?
Based on how he was acting, we were concerned that he may have ingested some kind of substance before police arrival, and we wanted to make sure that his vitals were stable and that he was medically cleared before we took any further steps in the investigation.
What happened when you got to the hospital?
We entered the ER with Mr. Dazey. Staff directed us to the behavioral health room because it wasn't so much he didn't have any traumatic injuries or anything that needed to be dealt with right away. Hesselbacher took him into that room. I met with staff just to explain to them the purpose of us being there and what we needed from them.
Was staff familiar with him?
Yes, one of the nurses specifically was familiar with Mr. Dazey.
Was Mr. Dazey examined?
He was by both nurses and the ER doctor.
What was the result of that examination to the extent you know?
They advised me that his vitals were all stable, he was cognizant, and that they would be clearing him medically.
Okay, so while you were at the hospital, was there any decisions made regarding search warrants?
There was. Prior to us ever leaving Avoca, we knew that we would be applying at this time for at least 2 search warrants, one for the house on Avoca and one for Tyler Dazey's person to collect any potential evidence. I contacted Captain Stile, my captain, and then Hoff, who was working on the search warrant applications, to see what we specifically wanted to apply for, what we wanted to gather. And it was at that time we decided we wanted to collect specimens of his urine and his blood to go along with other items.
Did you stay at the hospital pending that warrant?
Yes, I advised hospital staff that we were going to hang tight there because we can't draw blood. We need the techs up there to do that. So we just stayed up there awaiting approval for the search warrant from the judge.
Was the warrant approved ultimately?
It was.
While you were waiting for the warrants, did you have any conversations with Mr. Dazey?
I did, and it was specific to the search warrant. Both Hoff and I assumed that Mr. Dazey lived at 1605 Avoca, but I had not confirmed that with him. So after my conversation with Hoff, I walked back into the BH room and I asked Mr. Dazey if he resided on Avoca. He just shrugged his shoulders. I then asked him if he normally stayed at his mom's residence, if that was his normal residence. His response was, "Whose mom?" I then asked him, "Is Jennifer Dazey your mother?" And his response to that question was pretentious.
Did you feel he was just being obstinate with you at that time?
Absolutely.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
And it's leading. Sustained.
At some point, did Mr. Dazey indicate he needed to use the bathroom?
Yeah, that was roughly about 25 minutes after we got to the ER. He advised that he needed to urinate. I knew that we were working on getting a search warrant to collect his urine, so I asked him if he could just hold tight. We had some processing to do. That's when he stated to me, "I'm letting go. The keys are yours." I again asked him, "Hang tight for me. We need to collect." That's when I told him, "We're going to collect your urine." He then said, "I got to pee." Again, I urged him to just hold on for a couple minutes. He then leaned back in the sofa that he was seated on, and I could hear him urinating inside the Tyvek suit.
Did he do that more than once?
Multiple times while we were at the hospital.
Did at one point you tell him that he could have held it?
I did. I was a little disturbed that a grown man wouldn't hold his urine for a couple minutes, and his answer to that was, "Wars are meant to be fought."
Did you try to collect the sample at one point when he was urinating?
Yes, approximately an hour later, we had already secured the search warrant. I had advised Mercy staff that we were ready to do the collection. They were outside our room just getting their gear ready to go. I walked back in the room. Mr. Dazey advised that he had to urinate again. At this point in time, he had crawled down on the floor, asked if I could help him up. I helped him up off the floor. I told him, "Hey, you don't have to pee in your suit this time. Staff's going to walk in any minute. We'll have you urinate into a cup." Within seconds, staff walks in, and as they walk through the front door, or walk into the door of the room, I hear him urinating in his suit again. I scrambled to try to unzip his suit and asked one of the nurses to bring over a collection cup. By the time that happens, we got just a very small sample.
Did you have another effort at collecting a sample?
Yeah, approximately 40 minutes later, Officer Skrupski and I had transported Mr. Dazey from Mercy back down to the law enforcement center. I was at my desk. Skrupski was in the interview room with Dazey, just awaiting me to get prepared to come in and start interviewing him. Skrupski told me that he had to urinate again, so I asked Skrupski to escort Mr. Dazey to the bathroom, and I had a collection cup with me. We met in there. Again, I had unzipped his Tyvek suit to expose him. At that point in time, he thought that he felt as though he needed to urinate, but he didn't know if he could, and thought it might be a couple seconds. He then stated, "I'm not trying to dick you around." I told him, "Hey, we got time. We'll just sit here. Let me know when you need to go." Within a matter of seconds, he said, "Quantum entanglement, brother," and he started urinating. I was only a step away with the cup. I was able to reach into his stream and got a proper sample.
What was his demeanor at that time?
Completely cognizant, like he's telling me, "Hey, I'm not trying to mess with you here. I got to pee, but it's going to take me a second." He was, in my opinion, completely aware of what was happening.
At some point, did you observe and photograph Mr. Dazey?
Yes, as part of the search warrant execution, which we did after the interview, a part of that we took photos. I took photos of his person. During that time, I noted some abrasions on the backside of his right hand, two on his index finger, one on this middle knuckle, and one on this knuckle, and then a third abrasion to his ring finger, middle knuckle.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Show you what's been marked as exhibit number 41. Recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do. I took that photo.
I would move to have exhibit 41 admitted.
Any objection?
Your Honor, I'm going to object pursuant to 5.403. I think that photograph is just flat out inappropriate.
Is what?
Just flat out inappropriate.
Let me view it, please.
Permission to approach?
Yes. Okay, State's Exhibit 41 is admitted.
Yes. May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes. I don't think you're plugged in.
Were you able to identify the person that you took the photo of?
Yes, that is a photo of Mr. Tyler Dazey.
And you positively identified him as such?
Correct.
And is he the same Tyler Dazey that is the defendant in this case before the court today?
Yes, he is.
Now, you can take that down. Did you interview Mr. Dazey at the law enforcement center?
Yes. Corporal Carell and I interviewed him at 12:01 p.m. that afternoon in a recorded interview room in our CID offices.
Did you ask him about his sleep from the day before, the night before?
I did. That is a question that I regularly ask most people that I interviewed, just their normal sleep patterns. And I asked Mr. Dazey specifically how much sleep he had gotten the night before. He advised that he didn't get much sleep, upwards to maybe an hour at the most.
Did you also ask him when he last showered?
I did. I asked him about his bathing habits, and he advised that he used the shower in the main floor bathroom. He advised that he had taken one shower the evening before after he had a workout. He ballparked that to be around 8 p.m., and then he advised he had taken another shower just prior to police coming into his home that morning. And that is why he was naked.
Did you ask him if he owns a hatchet?
I did. Mr. Dazey acknowledged that he did own a hatchet. He advised me that he kept that hatchet in his toolbox within his bedroom, and he also noted that he had actually observed that hatchet that morning.
Did Mr. Dazey make any statements concerning his discipline and awareness of surroundings?
There were multiple times during the interview where he stressed how disciplined he was and how he was very aware of everything around him and what was happening.
Did you ask any questions about the layout of the house?
I did, and as soon as I asked that question, he said, "You were there." So he was obviously recognized I was in the room with him earlier that morning.
Did you ask him about his relationship with his mother?
I did. His response was, "It's fine, except for when she's acting sneaky like a witch." He then went on to talk about how his mother was part of a covenant of witches. I also asked, I followed that up with how he thought his mom thought of him. And his answer to that question was, "I think she hated me so much that she hated herself."
Did you ask when he last had a conversation with his mother?
Yes, he advised that was just before police came in and got him, and at the time she was practicing witchcraft.
Did he say where that conversation took place?
Yes, he stated that his mother was in her bed, again, noting that she was practicing witchcraft.
Did you ask about specific events that morning?
I did multiple times throughout the interview. Early on, when I tried to hone in on what he was doing in the minutes, the hours before police arrived, he would either say that he didn't remember or he would shift topic. Then toward the end of the interview, I again asked him what he could specifically recall happening before police got there. And he said that he was having a conversation in his head that he did not want to think about. This conversation was about trauma. He didn't want to think about it, and he would not expand on that when I asked him what that conversation was.
Did you ask him about his mom's witchcraft?
We went into that in a little more detail. He described her witchcraft as putting evil on him. He said just evil. I then asked him how he felt about his mother practicing witchcraft. And I think that is when he gets into stating something similar to, I just gave up. I just don't care. I don't need her to validate me. He then followed that comment up with, why would I care what a whore thinks? You sit around and drink yourself stupid, fuck like animals, and ruin your children's lives. Why would I care what a person like that thinks?
Did he say anything about, you know how witches are?
Yeah, that was in reference to, I asked him if he'd ever called his mother a whore to her face. And he said, yeah, I did. I asked how his mom responded to that, and he said, she's a witch. You know what witches are. Oh, I'm better than you. I will be your fear. I will be your enemy.
Did you ask him to explain his mother's traumatic injuries?
Yes, about an hour and 18 minutes into the interview, I got to the point where I wanted him to explain the significant and severe injuries that she had. And when I asked him how she got these traumatic injuries, his response was witchcraft. I then specified that I was referring to the physical injuries to her body. He again responded witchcraft. I then asked him, I was going to need a little better understanding of how witchcraft could cause such injuries. At that time, Mr. Dazey ended the interview.
Did you leave the recorder on when you left the interview room?
Yes, the recorder stayed on until we were all done executing the search warrant on Mr. Dazey's person. So at the conclusion of the interview, that's when I told him that we had to collect evidence from him, provided him a copy of the search warrant. Carell and I then exited the room to gather up our gear for collection. After the fact, when I went back and watched the interview to type up my report, I noted that Mr. Dazey made some comments aloud while we were out of the room.
What did he say? What were the comments?
He stated, I would gladly spend an eternity in hell if she could just have a chance at heaven.
Was Mr. Dazey also alone in the squad car when you brought him to the port, when he was brought to the port down at the law enforcement center?
Yes, so Skorupski and I transported him from Mercy back down to the law enforcement center. Once we pulled into the Sally Port, the two of us, I exited the squad car. In that process, I dropped my portable radio, the battery bounced off, and we were looking on the ground for my battery. Then we got him out, so he was in the squad car for over a minute before we pulled him out. After the fact, I went back and reviewed that footage from the squad car.
Did he say anything during that time he was in the squad car?
He did. Mr. Dazey made a couple comments during that time. He stated at first, they will never figure out the psychology. You have a choice. Conquer me, or hell it is. He then paused, stated, I love you, I'm tired, and that was the end of the comments.
Now, before Mr. Dazey was taken up to the jail floor after the interview, did he say anything spontaneously?
Yes, it was actually, he and I were just standing in the interview room together because we collected the Tyvek suit as evidence. I was waiting for Darrell to return with some clothing. We weren't talking, I wasn't questioning him, and he just stated aloud, witchcraft, brother, witchcraft. A lot that is wrong with my life. When people are trying to get in your way, when you are just trying to pursue happiness.
Did you tell him he was being arrested before he was taken up to the jail floor?
I did. He actually asked me if he was getting showered in, referring to going up to the jail floor. It was at that time I told him he was being arrested for the murder of his mother. His response was, "It's hard to argue witchcraft in court, isn't it?"
During all of your interactions with Mr. Dazey, did he at any time ever deny harming his mother or the dog?
Not once.
Thank you. I don't have anything further.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. On direct examination, you talked a little bit about watching the traffic cameras related to Kylie Frey or Kylie Dazey?
Correct.
All right. Are there any traffic cameras on Avoca?
There are not.
And which traffic camera were you watching on the corner of 24th and Jackson?
There's a camera at 24th and Jackson directed to the north, which captures the block in which she lives in, or lived in at the time.
And does it show the front door of her residence?
It does not. Her door is on the south side of the residence, recessed away from the street. The front door is actually for the apartment upstairs.
All right. And are there any other exits from her residence?
There is a back door on the main floor.
Okay. And I take it from your traffic camera, you couldn't observe those?
No.
All right. Life 360, and I think you talked about this a little bit, but Life 360 only actually tracks the phone, doesn't it?
Correct.
All right. So if the phone doesn't move, it doesn't track anything.
Correct.
And is it fair to say that, I know you, is it fair to say that lots of people know about the thousands of traffic cameras in Dubuque?
Some do. Some that have lived here forever, even actively involved in crimes, somehow don't realize it.
Okay. But lots of people do know about them, don't they?
Lots do, lots don't.
Okay. And they're not exactly hidden, are they?
No, they're not disguised in any fashion.
Okay. They're right out there sitting on top of the light poles.
Correct.
Now, you talked a little bit about quantum entanglement.
That was something Mr. Dazey stated to me right before he started urinating in the bathroom at the law enforcement center.
Did he explain to you what quantum entanglement was?
Tried to.
Okay. What did he tell you?
It's hard for me to explain.
If I were to show you your report, I think it appears in at least 2 different places in your report. Would that help refresh your memory?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm looking at pages 50.
Can you point out this one you're referring to?
Yeah, there's that one, and then over on 52, there's, he talks about it in this area.
Okay. I'm ready, Mr. Blair.
Now, did he kind of explain to you what he meant by quantum entanglement?
From what I captured from that is, if I was sitting at home and I was doing something, say I was drinking a beer, and I thought about you, Mr. Blair, then all of a sudden, wherever you were on this earth, that you would get the urge to drink beer, that I could put thoughts onto you.
Okay. He also used that term in reference to kind of a possession, didn't he? I'll refer you to page 50. He specifically talked as it related to possession.
Are you referring to someone trying to take over your being? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. He did make note of that.
On direct examination, you talked some about his mother practicing witchcraft. Did he explain to you how she practiced witchcraft?
From her bed, on cell phones with the other persons in the covenant, and that she would practice witchcraft upon him.
Well, and didn't he say that she did that by meditating upon him and putting thoughts in his head and possession and things like that?
Yes, he went into that.
He didn't actually talk about a conversation with his mother. He simply talked about witchcraft in response to you asking about the last time he had a conversation with his mother. Isn't that right?
I asked him when he last had a conversation with his mother, and he stated, right before you guys came and got me, she was practicing witchcraft.
Right. He starts going into, right before you guys came and got me, she was practicing witchcraft. Is that right?
That was response to his last conversation, his last interaction with his mother.
Okay. He said lots of things that really didn't make a lot of sense, didn't he?
Well, every time we would get to something pointed, and he would start, say, acknowledge that he had a hatchet, then when we would get more pointed, then he would take me in a different direction.
He also talked about being worshipped, didn't he?
Yes.
And that tied in with the quantum entanglement and the witchcraft, didn't it?
Yes,
And I think also somehow tied into when he took his medications.
correct.
If I can have just a minute, Your Honor. Investigator Rosenthal, was the interview recorded?
Yes, sir.
The whole thing was recorded, wasn't it?
Correct.
And I think you actually talked about going back and watching part of it after you'd originally left the room.
Yeah, in all cases, I watch my interview in full so I can document the interview in a written report.
Yes. Approach the witness. Okay, folks, we're going to take a short break to discuss a legal issue outside your presence. This will probably be about 10 minutes or so. Remember the admonition I gave you before. Report back to the jury room.
All right, to the jury.
Let the record reflect that we are in the courtroom in the presence of all the attorneys. The jury has been excused. Mr. Blair, you have an issue you want to discuss outside the jury's presence?
Your Honor, I have a recording of that interview, and I would like to offer that into evidence, and I would like to publish it to the jury. I would point out to the court that the state has opened the door to allow us to do so, that the rule of completeness allows us to do so, that the rule of completeness overcomes the hearsay objection. It doesn't overcome other evidentiary objections, but it does overcome the hearsay objection. That's specifically what it's addressed, what that rule addresses. And it's basically, I mean, you don't need me to explain the rule of completeness to you. You know what that means.
You make whatever record you want.
Essentially, Your Honor, the gist is that if they put in part of the story, we get to put in the rest of the story. And understanding, this is one of the situations, a statement taken from a defendant, this is one of the situations where the rule of completeness directly comes into play.
Mr. Nelson, if you want to respond.
Certainly. This is not a situation where it's about completion because we did not play any portion of that interview. Had we done that, perhaps the completion might apply. It does not. Wanting to play part of that recorded interview is pure hearsay. There are no exceptions to that in the rules. And just because their client refuses to testify doesn't mean that they can come in and use hearsay to get that before the jury. If they indeed want the rest of the story, as they say, then the defendant can testify. He can say whatever he wants through testimony so that we can cross-examine him. That's what this system is all about, not about having testimony come in without the ability to cross-examine.
Mr. Blair, do you have any authority, any case law, or any rules that you want to cite to in support of your request?
I can get you the rule for rule of completeness. I kind of assumed that you knew which rule that was. Do you need that?
No, you made the statement that the rule of completeness automatically trumps any hearsay.
If you read the rule, that's what it's addressing. It's addressing situations where evidence would otherwise be kept out under the hearsay rule. And by implication, it overcomes the hearsay objection. That is specifically what it's addressing, it's addressing situations where evidence would otherwise be kept out under the hearsay rule, under the rule against hearsay. And then that evidence is allowed to come in to complete the record, to allow the other side to respond and complete the statement. There is no restriction on whether that has to be done with witness testimony or whether it has to be done with, whether it can be done with a video recording of the statement that the witness was testifying about. The other thing about it, I would point out, Your Honor, is that my client has not, as of right now, has not refused to testify, and that's not the issue here. That's not an issue that's part of this decision, and it doesn't go into, it's not part of this. We're dealing with the fact that the state has put on part of it, has made assertions that are rebuttable with this, and we're proposing to complete the record and rebut those presumptions, those assertions.
You said the state has put on part of it. I think we can all agree the state has not shown any part of the video that you would like to show.
They have talked about what's on there.
Okay. So two components to this. Do you concede that what you want to play for the jury and offer into evidence is hearsay?
I would say that under the rules related to the rules of evidence, this would be an out-of-court statement by the defendant not being offered by the state, so it's not by a party opponent. Give me 1 second, please. I am going to refer you to one piece of relatively recent case law. State versus Flores, Iowa Supreme Court case from January 26th of 2024. deals directly with the rule of completeness. It was a situation where the defendant brought up in testimony certain aspects of a statement within a CPC interview, I believe. The state was then allowed, in order to complete the record, to play the entire CPC video. CPC video. The only significant difference between these two situations is who's asking.
Give me a second. I found Flores. It looks like it's 2 Northwest 3rd, 287. I think the portion of that case you're talking about, the Iowa Supreme Court says the rule of completeness applies regardless of which party opens the door. And I think that's the point you're making.
That is the point, Your Honor. That is at least part of the point that I'm making. And also the fact that you'll note that they went from somebody testifying about a statement that was made to being allowed to play the video, even though the defense hadn't played any portion of the video.
That case is certainly a little different factually. It deals with sexual abuse of a child. Do you know the age of the child from that case?
I do not off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I would note that they're not talking about in their analysis, at least in this portion of it, they're not talking about what's the word? They're talking specifically about the rule of completeness and not the catch-all rule that allows you to go around hearsay for child victims. They're not. The residual exception, that's what I'm looking for. Thank you, Ms. LaSance. That's the word. They're not talking about the residual exception. They're talking about the rule of completeness.
So without having read Flores in its entirety, I said sort of two components here. The first one, I think you've conceded that what you're proposing to put into evidence and show to the jury is hearsay. My second question for you, if the state asks Officer Rosenthal one question about some interaction he had with the defendant, and Officer Rosenthal talks about one particular comment the defendant made, do you take the position that that opens the door to the entire video coming in?
Your Honor, I don't propose to be an expert about at what point the door is opened. There was a lot more here than one point and one comment. I understand your question, and I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I would say that this is not that hypothetical, that this is a situation where they talked about it at length and where Investigator Rosenthal gave opinions as to whether or not Tyler knew what he was doing.
Okay, I understand that's not the circumstance. That's why it is a hypothetical. It's different than what we had here. I understand that. I think you get my point, and that is, at what point do you believe the door is opened up? And I think your answer is there isn't any fine line.
I think that's correct. I don't think there's some bright line that you can, but I think it's fair to say that that line's been crossed here.
Okay. For now, my ruling is, A, the state didn't show any portion of the video. B, what the state has offered up to this point in time is permissible. It's not hearsay. C, I think we've had a motion in limine that addresses this, and I think it was agreed upon by the defense. Now, that doesn't mean it automatically stays out. It means that we have to discuss it outside the jury's presence if you intend to go outside the motion in limine, which you have done, and I understand that. But you are entitled to cross-examine Officer Rosenthal about any portions of the video. You've seen it. You can ask him questions about things that the defendant may or may not have said. They may be objected to as hearsay. I don't know that. But you can cross-examine Officer Rosenthal on his expertise and his take on things that the defendant said. You're entitled to question this witness. I don't think you're entitled to put in, I don't know how long the video is, but a lengthy video where your client continually talks and discusses things that would be hearsay. I don't think you can shroud that under the rule of completeness and just say all of a sudden it all gets to come in even though it's almost entirely hearsay. I'm not going to let you show the whole video. You can offer it into evidence as a court exhibit if you want for purposes of completing the record and for appeal, but I don't think it's appropriate to let all of that come in when it is hearsay, and you have the right to cross-examine this witness.
May I make one point, Your Honor, in response? I would note, Your Honor, that while I can cross-examine him, I can't make him change his opinion. And he has made opinion statements about that. The jury is entitled to form their own opinion, but they're not being allowed to watch the actual interview.
I agree with everything you said. What's your point?
Therein is the problem. The jury's right to form their own opinion has now been abrogated. It's now been curtailed. They're not being given that right.
Well, to the extent that he offered his opinion, he did so without objection. So if there was a question that called for an opinion and you don't believe that he was authorized to give that opinion, I didn't hear any objection, so it came in. You said I can't get him to change his opinion. I don't know if you can or you can't. That's cross-examination. But I understand your point. Any other record you want to make on this issue?
Your Honor, at this time, we're going to offer this as a court exhibit.
Let's call it E. E as in elephant. Okay. And you have a flash drive with the whole video on it. We will call that court exhibit E, and it will come in for that purpose. It will not be shown in open court. It will not go back to the jury.
And for the record, and I want to be 100% transparent about it, we did cut out the part where he asked for an attorney.
Okay,
So.
understood. Thank you. Any other record from the defense on this issue?
I believe there is one reference in there that we were planning on cutting out, although we hadn't gotten that done yet, but there is one reference in there to his diagnoses, and that could easily be cut out.
Okay, understood.
It hasn't been on that exhibit, but it could. I mean, I was not proposing to show that portion to the jury.
Anything else from the state on this issue?
Yes, Your Honor. The fact that this interview was recorded really has nothing to do with the testimony. The recording was not mentioned except by the defendant. The state didn't play the video and didn't refer to it. And if what defendant is standing on is correct, then any time there's a statement against interest, then a defendant would be free to play any recorded interview regardless of whether it's hearsay or not. It would just be a complete defeat of the hearsay rule, and it would defy hundreds of years of evidentiary jurisprudence. So I'm asking the court to overrule that and not allow that to be done, not allow it to be played.
Okay, and that's what I've already ruled. Mr. Hoover, do you want to give the court exhibit to the court reporter, please?
Actually, that's not true, I guess.
Okay, are we ready for the jury and to resume cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Let's bring the jury in. Okay, Mr. Blair, whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
No further questions.
Mr. Nelson, any redirect?
No redirect, no questions.
Okay, thank you, sir. You are free to step down. Another witness for the state?
We have no further witnesses, Your Honor, and the state rests.
All right, very good. Okay, folks, the state has rested. That means that we've received all of their evidence. There are a few things that the attorneys and I have to discuss at this point in time before we turn to the defense's evidence. So I'm going to give you a short break again. This break will probably be about 15 minutes or so. Remember the admonition, report back to the jury room.
Can we approach real quick, Your Honor, before letting the jury go?
Yes. Okay. The attorneys approached and told me that the defense has their witness here and ready to go. In the interest of continuing to move things along, instead of sending you out to organize their evidence, they've got a witness ready. So we're going to go ahead and start with a witness for the defense. Go ahead and call your witness, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, we would call Corporal Justin Stair. I apologize, Your Honor. I thought he was out there already. Okay, hold on.
You swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead and have a seat there. State your name and spell it for the record, please.
Justin Stair, Justin, last name Stair.
Go ahead, counsel.
Yeah. Corporal, you're a certified peace officer, correct?
Correct.
How long have you been a peace officer?
24 years.
And you're currently a corporal. How long have you been a corporal?
That was probably since about 8 years now. Or no, sorry, more than that, 12 years. Or, yeah, 11, 12 years.
And you, what did you have to do in order to become a corporal?
Just whenever there's a promotional exam, we take a test, and then we have an interview, and then they certify a list and pick from that list.
And what are your current duties?
I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second. Okay, right now I'm a street corporal.
And how about back on January 18th of 2024? What was your assignment at that time?
I was a corporal back in criminal investigations.
And on that particular day, did you take pictures?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any idea about how many pictures you took?
Not right offhand, a lot.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit A. Okay. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do.
And was that a photograph you took?
Yes, it was.
And can you tell the jury where, in conjunction of the house, was that photograph taken?
So if you're looking at the house, it would be on the left-hand side by the driveway area.
Can you say that again? I apologize.
If you're looking at the house, it'd be on the left side of the house, which I believe that would be the east side of the house or southeast side of the house, and the driveway area.
Okay. How far from the stairs would it have been?
I'm not sure by distance.
It would have been fairly close to the stairs?
If you're talking about the rear stairs, correct?
Yes.
Where the rear stairs was at, so if they're here, it's somewhere further away from the stairs. I mean, we're like right at the base of it going up. I know that. It was somewhere right in on the driveway, more towards the driveway area.
Was there a particular reason you took a picture of this area?
Just taking photographs, this struck me as something to take a photo of. You know, whether there's possible print or whatnot. The basics of, or the base of the photos is just taking overalls of everything as you can see, or as is.
Sure. Did you have an opportunity to observe the rear door?
Yes.
And did you have an opportunity to observe the steps at the rear door?
Yes.
Okay. And what were your observation of those stairs?
Obviously, there was snow on them, snow covered, and there was prints or impressions in the steps.
Did you take any pictures of those?
No.
Was there any particular reason why you didn't?
No.
Then there's, could you put it down for a minute, Your Honor? You also took some pictures of tracks, correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you what's been admitted as Defendant's Exhibit C. Okay. And are these the tracks that you took a picture of?
Yes.
Okay. And were you ever able to make any kind of determination as to what made those tracks?
I knew they were definitely animal tracks.
Okay. Do you have any kind of idea what kind of animal?
My guess would be a rabbit or a squirrel. I live in the country and I see those all the time every winter, so it's one of those animals.
Do you have any idea about how deep the snow was?
I don't recall right offhand how deep it was.
Did you take any close-up pictures of those tracks?
I thought there was some that took closer photos, if I remember right.
Just have a minute. I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Corporal.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Corporal Stair. How are you today?
Good.
Good. Okay, so one thing we can see from these photos is that it is definitely, can I keep that up? Mr. Hoover, thanks. It's definitely snow covered out there, right?
Yes.
In your experience as a person and a officer, how great are photos taken in white snow?
Not very good.
Okay. You did take close-up photos of those tracks, though, correct?
I believe I had some that were a little closer.
All right, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm handing you what I marked as State's Exhibit 42. There are two photos here. Can you take a look at those? Can you tell me what those are, Corporal?
Yes, like the animal tracks that I saw before.
That you took a close-up of these tracks in Defendant's Exhibit C.
I believe so.
Okay, can you see in those photos the tracks up close?
Not really.
It's difficult.
Yes.
But can you make them out?
In this one, yes. And at an angle, yes, you can kind of see them here as well.
Okay.
It's faint, but you can see them.
And in those photos, what do those tracks appear to be to you?
Animal tracks.
Okay, move to admit State's Exhibit 42.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
42 is admitted. Can you take that?
Take the picture down. Are you done with it?
Yeah. Okay, can you put up your exhibit, was it C, Mr. Hoover, the other one you referenced?
A.
A. Can you put that one up, please?
Hold on a minute. Let me just. All right. It's up, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay, does it appear in that photo that there are several fairly distinctive footprints or tracks?
Yes.
Okay. Could it also be possible that there could be footprints or tracks from within the home or somewhere else around this crime scene?
Correct.
And would it make sense for you as an officer to...
Correct.
Because snow melts, right?
Yes.
Those tracks are going to be gone at some point.
Yes.
Okay. And may I put up, can you put up the states, please?
Yes.
I'm putting up Exhibit 8. Okay, Corporal, you have a laser pointer up there, right?
Yes.
Actually, I think I'm going to take it from you.
Okay, go right ahead.
In the first photo in States Exhibit 8, you see the staircase there?
Yes.
Okay, and anywhere in front in this photo, do you see an area where Defendant's Exhibit A could potentially be from within this photo?
No.
Okay. Now, in the second photo in States Exhibit 8, we have that same door right there, correct?
Yes.
Okay, in the corner down here, we see what appears to be a bit of concrete. Do you see that?
Yes.
Would it make more sense that that is the spot that they're referencing in that previous photo?
It could very well be.
Okay. And as you looked in the sequence of the photos that you did, let me ask you this. Do you typically take photos in sequence as you're processing a scene?
When doing overall photos, yes.
Okay. And would it make, and you did it in a sequence in this case, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so would it make sense in your sequence as you reviewed it that this area would make more sense for the photo that they're referencing?
Correct.
Okay. And that's where? The driveway?
Yes.
Would it make sense that that area of melted snow surrounded by snow, ice, tracks was made by a car at some point?
Could have been, yes.
Okay, no other questions.
Mr. Hoover?
Thank you. I'm just going to keep that up. That's okay. Okay. Corporal Stair, I think this is the area you were talking about right down here, correct?
Yeah, somewhere in that area, probably that print was from, yes.
And would there be any possibility of someone entering the house from this position right here?
Could they went? Yeah,
Would it make more sense that someone might have entered the house from over here?
they could have.
Okay. No further questions.
Nothing else.
Thank you, sir. You're free to go.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, now there are some issues that the attorneys and I will go through. We'll give you a short break. 15, this will probably actually be a little bit longer break, probably 15 or 20 minutes. Please be seated, everyone. Okay, the record will reflect that we are now outside the presence of the jury. The state rested their case. We had a sidebar. All parties agreed that rather than the defense making motions at that point, we were going to take the testimony of Officer Stair because he was here, and I think believed to be fairly short. The defense will make any motions they have now. The court will consider those motions to have been made at the close of the state's evidence and to be timely. Mr. Nelson, you agreed to that? That is agreeable. Okay, very good. Any motions from the defense? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this point, we would make a motion in judgment of acquittal. Looking at the evidence in light most favorable to the state, Your Honor, the state hasn't presented any evidence of malice or forethought or premeditation as required in elements 3 and 4 of at least the uniform jury instructions. Your Honor, in fact, the evidence of kind of what happened is fairly scant, other than definitely there was a homicide that took place, but there's little to no evidence that there was premeditation involved in here. There was any kind of planning. There's little to no evidence of malice or forethought in this particular case. Additionally, I would say that the state hasn't even met its burden as far as Tyler Dazey is the one who committed these actions. All we have is Mr. Dazey was in the residence and that he owned something that may have caused these injuries. No affirmative evidence saying that Mr. Dazey possessed it on that day or used it on that day. So we believe that murder 1 and murder 2, there has not been a sufficient question for the jury made. As to any of the other lesser included, including voluntary manslaughter, we won't at this point make a motion in judgment of acquittal for any of the remaining lesser included, aside from number 1, that again the state hasn't generated a jury question looking at the light most favorable to the state that Tyler Dazey was the one who inflicted these wounds. And then as far as the animal abuse, Your Honor, while certainly, again, the state has failed to prove or at least generate a jury question looking at the light most favorable to the state that Mr. Dazey inflicted any serious injury, death, or injury on the animal. But additionally, the code section specifically has an exception, which if the defendant was the owner or didn't have or had the owner's permission to euthanize the dog in a reasonable manner if the animal is in a permanent state of pain or suffering. And again, looking at the evidence in the light most favorable to the state, 1, the state hasn't proved that the defendant wasn't a co-owner of this dog, that even if he was a co-owner, that he wasn't acting at the behest of his mother, and that the testimony that was given was that it was one strike, and the dog died instantaneously. And again, the state hasn't provided any evidence that the animal wasn't at the time in a state of pain or suffering. So with that, Your Honor, we would ask that you grant our motion and judgment of acquittal.
The state's response.
Thank you, Judge. In reference to the status of the dog, our first witness said that the dog was Jenny's dog, and that under the statute is all the state would have to prove, and we don't need to prove that dog to the exclusion of all potential owners. That would be something the defendant would have had to need to bring up. When it comes to the elements presented to the jury, the state's position is certainly that a fact question has been presented to go to the jury's consideration. Evidence was that when Nick showed up at 1605 Abacus Street on January 17th, approximately 8 o'clock p.m., Tyler was home that night. Ring camera from the front of the door shows Jennifer Dazey letting Echo in from going outside at 10 o'clock p.m. There is no more movement on that camera until 8:38 a.m. when Christy Fullman arrives at the home. What does she see? Tyler Dazey naked. As she sees him, she waits, and he then goes into another room. She then proceeds to locate Jennifer Dazey in the bed in the same residence with one Tyler Dazey. Police are called and they respond. It's clearly a gruesome murder scene. And long story short, they process the scene. They find a tactical hatchet that clearly is capable of producing the wounds that Ms. Dazey suffered, as well as the wound that Echo Dazey suffered. The medical examiner also testified to that same fact. If the jury looks at the photos themselves and looks at the hatchet, they are able to make a determination as to whether or not that hatchet, owned by Tyler Dazey, seen by him that morning upon his own admission, was in fact the weapon used in those crimes. When it comes to the issue of premeditation, deliberation, malice aforethought, and all the other things, number one, the state has alleged, and I believe proven, that a hatchet was used, which is a dangerous weapon, which changes the discussion for the jury. Second of all, if that is not determined, the state has shown that there were 17 separate wounds to Jennifer Dazey, one wound to Echo, that's 18. The jury can hear argument as to what that means and will be given an instruction that those things, premeditation, deliberation, all those things, do not require any specific time, but the state alleges that that would take some time to swing that hatchet 18 times. The state believes, considering this, even despite other doors on the home, there is an ultimate fact question as to whether or not the defendant committed these acts, and the evidence has tied him to it, and we are asking that you deny the motion.
Your Honor, we would propose that the state's theory of premeditation would essentially make it impossible to have anything other than murder in the first degree. If you struck more than once, then that automatically meant that you had premeditation, and that's just not what the standard is. So.
Okay, I understand the argument both ways. I think what the state's saying is, if there's one shot and you pull the trigger, it's instant. If you swing something as dangerous as a sharp axe and swing it 17 times, that there's time in between each time that you strike a blow with that. That's the argument. And I understand the defense's point is, well, does that mean every time someone is hit more than once with a dangerous instrument that it automatically creates premeditation? I get it both ways. That helps to show that on that issue, it's a fact issue that the jury's going to have to weigh and have to decide. The motion made by the defense has to be considered in the light most favorable to the moving party. In this case, I won't rehash all of the evidence, but we certainly have enough evidence in the record to generate a fact issue as to both counts, count one and count two. I am going to deny the defense's motion for judgment of acquittal at this time. Any other motions from the defense?
No, not at this time, Your Honor.
Anything from the state at this point? No, Judge. Okay, we'll go off the record. The record will reflect that we are now outside the presence of the jury. Both parties have rested. Any motions that the defense wants to make at this time?
Your Honor, we would just renew our previous motion.
Okay. Any response from the state other than what has been stated before? No, Judge. All right. I will consider the motion and the same arguments that were previously made and the resistance made by the state for the same reasons I gave before. There is a fact issue that has been generated that the jury will have to rule on. I am going to deny the motion again for judgment of acquittal. Anything else from the defense at this time? From the state?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll go off the record.